Color is a power which directly influences the soul. And that's by the artist Kandinsky, who is an incredible, iconic artist I recommend you look into. And thank you so much for tuning in again or for the first time, and Happy New Year. I would love for you to go to lucydumascoaching.com if you have any questions about who I am or what I do. And if you want a 20-minute call about anything I can support you in, because I always like to think I know a little bit about a lot of things. Anyway, just click the button and book a call. All right. So my guest today is officially Nichole Smith, although we're going to call her Nick. And here is her bio. She is a marketing insider and a color psychology expert known for decoding the human impact of color and design. And we've never had this topic on this show in the 6.5 years. So I'm super excited to dive into all things color. She has spent 20 years building marketing and creating direct feel good brands for people. And she's also, I love this, an expert in the art of joy. And she is an award winner, including a European Product Design Gold. And she's been featured in publications like Metro, US Today, Daily Mail, Real Simple Magazine, Telegraph, LA Times. And she lives a joy first life surrounded by sheep in Lancashire in the UK with the man of her dreams and three energetic girls. Two are human, one's a Frenchie. I love it. So she also has a podcast called Joy First. And welcome, Nick. Thank you so much for uh, fitting me into your schedule because in the UK we're is it 6 hours difference or more, seven? So I appreciate you taking the time this evening.
Oh, thank you for having me. Excited to be here. I love talking to photographers about photography. That's where my career began. So I feel like home.
I love it. So you were sharing with me before we started recording a little about your background and how you got to where you are. So I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, sure. So my career started in photography. I was a graphic designer and photographer, and everyone told me I needed a niche. Even 20 years ago, that was a thing.
Mhm.
And I was working with a maternity photographer, a very famous maternity photographer in Seattle, and she suggested pet photography because I had a 6-month-old Great Dane puppy who I was obsessed with.
Oh my God.
And yeah, pet photography was not really a thing. There were only about three in the entire country back then, and it sounded like a good idea. And I was obsessed with my dog, so that is the niche I found myself in and managed to grow a very successful pet photography and design studio. Started working with a lot of brands, created my own lifestyle brand with a couple of partners called Dog is Good, which is still going strong, based in California today. And yeah, it's kind of all evolved from there. So I can thank a maternity photographer and a Great Dane puppy.
I love it. So about 20 years ago, I started thinking, there's a niche that nobody's doing that could be a wide open field and
Mhm.
good money. Um, if I love dogs as much as I love kids, I would have pivoted. But kids are my heart. Um, but now, it's a thing, and I love seeing that unfold. So how did you evolve into being someone that supports people in their branding and, just that whole world of identity marketing and creation?
Yeah, so that all started really early. Like I mentioned, I had a design and photography studio, and because I did both things, I started working with a lot of brands in addition to private clients really early on, and just started to really develop a strong niche and a lot of expertise in the area of building pet brands in particular because of the niche I was in, and started doing that at a pretty high level for companies like Petco and Purina and Victoria Stillwell. And when I moved to the UK, I followed love to England in 2012 and I needed a visa. So I did a master's in marketing and I got really interested there in a couple of things. One, I discovered what I'm really good at is strategy in addition to the visual stuff. And I got really interested in sense marketing. So, in particular, I found smell really interesting, the way that brands use smell. But that's very, very technical and sciencey, and
Mhm.
I'm not. I also got really deep into color psychology there, and that's kind of where my expertise began to really unfold. And then I did some additional certifications in color psychology and the branding work that I do now, although I've done branding for 20 years, for the last 10 or so, that work has been really deeply rooted in a combination of color psychology and archetypes so that we can create really strong, psychologically driven brands that make a lot of the decision making easier and have much more reliable outcomes for people, in addition to just being beautiful. And the joy thing has kind of come along because entrepreneuring is hard, right?
Yes.
I feel like all of us burn out at some point. I burned out twice before I was 30, owning these two businesses simultaneously. And that kind of became one of the things I was really passionate about along the way is, teaching, just like you do, teaching other entrepreneurs how to avoid the hard stuff. And so my personal mission has kind of along the way developed to help co-create a joy first world. I think we're in a time right now where we're experiencing a joy crisis, and entrepreneurs have always in every economy had a lot to do with getting us out of those sort of crises.
Mhm.
And for that to work, we need to really be fortified with joy and making decisions from there and not from fear. So it all kind of, melds together. I think when you spend all your time working with color, it's hard not to be someone who advocates for joy. And so here we are.
I love it. So, first of all, I love that you've got books in a rainbow behind you. That makes me really happy. I noticed that right away. Um, so, I'm a fool for color also. Uh, when I was working on my logo colors, I don't know how many hours, days, weeks I researched and the whole like it's amazing to me the subtlety of emotional reaction that just the slightest change in color can communicate. Like trying to find the right, I have like a dusty lavender is my main color, and then I have just the right tone of a taupey gray and a little bit of a fleshy peachy. Um, for that was uh, my photography for clients for children and families. Anyway, trying to find the right shade of dusty lavender. Like, no, that's too purple. No, that's too gray. So, tell me a little about why color uh, matters. How does it change how we feel? Why not just pick any old color and get a brand and all of that and call it good. I mean, yes, it's more important to have a lot of other things uh, right in our website. Like it's the to me, it's the refinement that steps us up to a next level where people don't even know why they're having a reaction to us. So I'll let you talk on that. It is a favorite topic with me. So I'd like a little someone that has actually officially studied this and works in that area.
Sure. So, yeah, you mentioned a lot of important stuff. First of all, the subtleties are really important. I think one of the things that I find fascinating is how little we learn about color. especially considering that it is the number two most impactful thing that we take in visually as human beings. So, number one is movement, and this is obviously
Mm.
based on our safety as a species, right? If you see something moving out of the corner of your eye, you're going to turn and look at it and make sure it's not about to eat you, right? Um, but second to that, color is one of our most powerful systems for getting information, and so it has a huge impact on us, and it's everywhere all the time, right? We can never really be separate from color in our existence other than these horrible gray spaces we keep creating for ourselves, which are not good for us at all. But we take in, color is light, so we take it in through our eyes and then it gets interpreted, and it does a couple of really interesting things inside our body. We have psychological primary colors. So we all got taught the primaries in grade school, right? Red, yellow, blue. But in color psychology, which is much more about how the color actually impacts us, there are psychological primaries. For example, red is one, and it impacts us physically. So, on one side of the spectrum, you can imagine any bright red, and that's going to be quite stimulating, physically stimulating. So, it can do things like raise our heart rate. It can make it feel like time is going faster. It can also make us feel angry or aggressive. And on the other side of the spectrum, light red is pink. And so it can be very physically soothing. It can lower our heart rate and make, feeling aggressive or feeling even sort of very physically active quite difficult. So you might have heard how there are some prisons that paint the interior of their intakes rooms pink. You
Mhm.
might have also heard stories about college football teams painting the opposing team's locker room pink to bring down their, yeah,
Never heard
yep.
that.
In fact, it is so powerful that there is now a law in college sports that you can paint your locker room whatever color you want, but the away team and the home team have to have the same color because color is so powerful that it could subdue the visiting team. So that I think that's a really good example of what it can do for us. But
So
red,
while we're on that pink,
mhm.
so the something I find also fascinating is there's pink where I feel really good
Yes,
wearing that, and there's pink where I just want to get it off me.
yes,
And my sister and I love pink sweaters, but
yes,
it has to be, like
the
I'm
right
always in the
pink.
search. It has to be uh, a cool pink. If it's got a little peachy tone, I just
Okay.
don't feel good in it.
We're
And
going to circle back to this because this
yeah,
is
so I
really
just wanted to,
important. And that is the crux of where I think most of us can have a whole new relationship with color. So
yeah,
let's come back to that exact
yes.
point.
So you were
But
on
I want to
red.
make sure not to, I don't want to leave people hanging on the psychological primaries. And I'll just
Yes.
mention quickly that red affects us physically, blue affects us mentally, green is sort of like a break. It's quite restful,
Mm.
restorative, and yellow affects us emotionally. And
Mhm.
every single one of these is on a spectrum, right? Of soothing to stimulating. And there's a spectrum of sort of a positive impact and a negative impact. And every single color has both sides, depending on the tone, the shade, the amount, the context. And there's only one color that only has negative impact and doesn't have any positive impact at all. And do you want to take a guess at what it is?
Is it one of the basic color wheel?
Uh-uh.
Brown?
It's gray.
Oh,
Gray.
yeah,
Yeah. So a 50-50 sort of white and black gray, not like a blue with a gray tone, but like
right.
gray has absolutely no positive psychological benefit at all. So it's not capable of doing any good for us, but it can do bad.
Hmm.
It can be very bad for us. So my enemy in my work is the color gray, and I actually am just creating some content this week about a few gray things I own that I love because I am so hard on gray all the time. There are a
Yeah.
few gray things I have that I love, so I don't want, if you have gray things you love, I don't want to criticize that, but
Like
most of
this
us
part
end
of
up,
my scarf, you know,
yes,
gray.
yes. Most of us end up choosing gray by default, not because we love it. And that's the behavior that I really and am interested in helping people find alternatives for. So if we circle back to your point around pink and the right pink, this is really important because in addition to understanding these primaries and the ways that color impacts us once it kind of gets into our system, understanding that all colors can be divided into four groups. And that first group is blue based and yellow based colors. So you mentioned I have to have a cool pink,
Hmm.
and anything with that slight bit of peachiness totally turns you off. Other people would be the exact opposite of that.
Hmm.
And then if we take it one step further and we take all these groups, the our whole group of yellow based colors and our whole group of blue based colors, and we can divide those groups one more time into colors that are sort of clear and bright and have nothing added versus colors that have black or gray added to subdue them. So,
Hmm.
my guess, based on what you've said and the other colors that you said you'd like, is that your preferences would end up in the group that are blue based and subdued. That you like the colors that are cool with that little bit of gray added to kind of, as you mentioned, to make them a bit dusty.
Yes.
And that, in my world, that group is called Seaside, which other people might call summer. And most people show a very strong preference for one of these groups. And it's a very useful framework to be able to create color harmony. So you described a couple of times how finding the right color brings you so much joy and how it feels so good. That's a fact. That's a mathematical fact that colors that are in harmony feel very good in our body, just like music that is in harmony feels very
Mhm.
good in our body. But nobody teaches us what colors, how to do it, what to eliminate to make sure that there's no discord. And that's what I'm in the business of doing.
Love it. I love it. So, one of the things that comes to mind as a useful tool in our photography is how we can use color to have it pleasing, have it jarring. Um, One of my first images that I thought, this is art was I was in Germany and there was a little stream wherever I was, and this little boy in a red sweater was throwing something to ducks, and the whole scene was green, and I put him in the lower third ish in his red sweater. And that opposites on the color wheel has a story to it, has a comfort. And sometimes when I'm judging other photographers for, professional jurying, I'll see like, I like this image, but why am I not fully into it? And it's because the color harmonies are off. And people that know what they're doing can do that intentionally to make you feel a little uncomfortable. But it's
Yep.
a really useful, almost starting point for photographs maybe that you're going to enter into competition is to think about what's the color story here. I photographed black and white as an artist for years before going into color because I didn't want to do color. It's kind of easy to make a pretty picture with good color, but I wanted to know why I would add color. So I love, there's so many levels as artists and photographers, and the branding is something super strong as well. And all of this can go into our our art too. So okay, and continue.
Yeah, and there's another really, for a conversation around profitability and who's paying us and how we're making money as photographers. there's a side of this that is so, so important that is partly why I'm so passionate about supporting photographers because A, I was one, and B, I understand the business so well, but
Hmm.
also because there's this element that nobody ever talks about and we never really we think about, but not in a really clear way. And that is I think having this understanding of these four groups that we talked about, the really interesting thing that's come out of the research is each that human beings can also be divided into four groups. We've seen this
Oh,
over time where, everyone's trying to divide us in different ways, right? We've got human design and Enneagram, and like the early days, we had, a whole bunch of philosophers talking about all kinds of the red people and the green people and body fluids and all kinds of weird ways to divide us up. But ultimately, the lens I look through is a Carl Jung lens, who's sort of the father of psychology, the father of archetypes, and personality type tests like Myers-Briggs or MBTI have come out of the Jung camp, and it's not perfect. It's a white guy in the early 1900s, right? Like it's not perfect, and no one wants to be shoved into a box. But what's really interesting about it is that when you look at sort of the baseline of these four personality types, and when they're tested against these four color groups, there is a extremely strong statistical correlation between a particular group and a particular group of colors,
mm,
and that plays out across the world, across languages. That's sort of a human truth that we tend to fall into one of these camps, and then when we fall into this camp, we tend to prefer these type of colors. And what is so amazing about that is A, understanding ourselves in a way that is mind blowing and fun and
yeah,
exciting, especially if you're someone like me. Like I never knew how to dress myself or do like my house, and once you
right.
have this framework, you have tools to do that without being an expert. And the other side of it is when you are someone who not only owns a business and has to have a website and a brand, but you make artwork that people put in their homes,
Hmm.
and there is a very, very good chance that they want photographs that look good in their living room. And if you have the ability to attract someone with a particular style and give them artwork that fits that style, you are more likely to have more clients and make higher average sales. So, for example, if you were to build a brand in this summer seaside way that you've described with the dusty pink and the dusty purple and soft and muted, and your photographic style reflects that, then you're attracting people who have a similar personality type, who like similar colors, who want similar images, and probably have homes that are designed in this way as well. So when they look at these images, they'll think, wow, that'll look great in my living room.
Interesting.
And it makes it easier for them to say yes. It makes it easier for them to find you as a good fit for them. And what I love about it is there's four of these types. So there's no wrong answer, right? Because there's
Right.
people in every type, there's photographers in every type, there's a path for everybody here where we all feel really self-expressed and we can find our people. So it's a really different, interesting way, I think, to look at niche and specializing and knowing your brand and your clients.
I mean, I know this, but I didn't know that part. Uh,
Cool, right?
One of the things I do when I'm coaching someone is have them create what I call an identity map.
Yep. Hmm.
And it's it's kind of like a dream board, except you're just going through magazines, you're picking out things that visually attract you, including uh, words, the way that a word, I also love fonts.
Yeah, typography is so fun, isn't it? Yeah.
And every time there is an absolute unique color palette. Uh, like, not that it's totally no one's ever had that palette before, but there's a clear trend, which would be I I know you've got a little gift that I'm going to go look at that's about your color type, right?
Yeah,
Um,
we've got a great quiz.
yes, we'll talk about that. But that adds that little extra knowledge that I didn't know, like why. Um, One of my clients clipped out so much that he made two boards, which really wasn't necessary because each of them was identical, even though they had different items. There was also, you know, texture goes into it. The
Absolutely.
flow, some people do it very linear, some,
Yeah.
do it flowy. But wow, that really adds a like a little caught as your the safe cracker. It adds one little thing every
Yeah, it's
time
amazing, isn't it? And
I'm
what you pointed out is so important as well, that the preferences that these types have are not just for color. For example, shape is a really important part of this. So you have two types that like things quite sharp, and you have two types that like things much more rounded. You have preferences for texture. You have two types that prefer things very glossy and shiny, and two types that absolutely hate shiny and prefer things matte or distressed. Um, and they're not always the same two types. They kind of cross over for different ways. But once we know these preferences, A, we can design a brand really easily because we don't have to look at all the options. We can start with four and know that we've narrowed it down to like, I know you're going to want rounded. I know you're going to want distressed. And I know the color group that we're going to be working in. I know the types of fonts that match this and the ones that don't. And so you can see how much time it saves to eliminate every option because we have a good starting point, which is why I developed a product called a brand in a week. So our premium branding offering is doing an entire rebrand in 7 days because of these frameworks where it's like, we don't need to look at everything. We know where we're going to
Mhm.
start, which is awesome. But it's great when you're building a brand, when you're building your portfolio. So I end up helping a lot of photographers with this and curating your portfolio to be what I call psychologically consistent includes putting it into one of these color groups. It doesn't mean it's the only thing you ever photograph. It means it's the thing you lead with when you're trying to sell to someone because it makes them feel safe and secure that they know what they're going to get. And it helps build desire that makes it clear to them that they want it, right?
Okay.
And all those other pieces then go into the brand as well.
Yes. So what I love about this is, um, okay, so I think the wrong way to create a brand, and I'm guessing you'll agree with me, is to try to figure out what your clients like. Like I've seen, and a lot of times it's men. Sorry, guys, I do love you. They'll be like, "Oh, luxury, black and gold," and and they create these things that, or they might think, "Oh, what's the packaging for Rolex or something?" Or a woman might think, "Oh, what's Tiffany's?" So I'll go with Tiffany blue.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
what I'm hearing is when you do that, there's going to be an incongruity potentially because who you are, what your preferences and your textures and things is not necessarily going to fit with what we might think a luxury should look like. And I love what you're saying that when we understand and create branding that is really from us, that there is an audience for us that will be attracted to us. Um,
Yeah. I
I
think
mean,
it's important. I agree with that. And I think it is important. And I'll dive into that. I think it's really important, and I know you will agree with this, that we don't get caught into like build it and they will come fallacy of marketing. So,
right.
branding and marketing, two separate things. And I just have to like plant that flag and say, like, what your customers want and think is super important. But what you said is absolutely true, which is that if we can create a brand, an identity, a portfolio from a place that is authentic, where we resonate and we can be very consistent, that's a really important piece, right? And that we have a strong foundation, from a design and energetic and aesthetic standpoint there, that is a huge competitive advantage that we
Yes.
have is that we can do that thing that we do better than anyone else. And we will then absolutely attract if we can build it psychologically consistent and trying to eliminate some of that discord. If we can create harmony and hone it, then we absolutely will attract to us, especially when we're using these four groups, because we can be confident that we are going to attract those those
Right.
people.
Right.
So the brands that you described, the Rolex, the Tiffany's, the Chanel, the stereotypical luxury brands, they fall into a group I call Starshine, which is winter, and it's black, white, silver, right? It's the way that we are often sold luxury. It is the lowest hanging fruit for a premium brand, but it is also the smallest group in the world. There are less, especially in the Western world, there's often more in Asia, but most of us are not Starshines. Most of us are what I call fireside and seaside, so autumns and summers, especially in photography. And most of us have portfolios, especially that are fireside or autumn, because we shoot in a lot of these environments where there's wood and trees and things that are autumnal in color. And if we're trying to build this black and white and silver premium brand and we're shooting images out in the park with warm golden hour light,
Mhm.
there's a problem here, right? These
Right.
things do not match. So if you want to build a black and white and silver brand, you're probably going to be shooting in black and white as well because you need your portfolio to match your brand, right? Otherwise, you have massive discord and you're attracting a black and white and silver audience and then giving them bright, colorful green grass in their photos. They don't want that. It's not going to fit their black and white minimalist home, right? So 100% agree with you.
Yeah, I love that. I could talk to you forever. So when I rebranded, um, which of course, not just the color choice and the fonts, but the about me, which actually was very simple. But as soon as I had that change in a good website, people would come to me already 90% booked.
Yeah,
And I had so many people come to my home and say, "You're exactly who I expected to meet." And
100% the right
and
move. Yeah.
yes, there's when I've done classes on branding, um, I would I would show two examples of young men that at the time were like on the speaker circuit and people knew them. And one of them, like, he wore t-shirts with like crazy, fiery, animal-y things, and he had a faux hawk, and um, black and red were his colors, and he was that energetic, kind of intense guy. And then the other, Jesh de Rocks, was very gentle, very soft, very emotional. It, his website, you would pick, what's your animal? What's your this? And then he'd say, "Welcome, tiger flower who loves to blah, 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 blah." And I thought, if somebody just made a website and a brand for the soft guy that looked like the energetic guy, how confusing that would be for a client to be like, "Wait a minute,
Mhm.
who are you?"
Yeah, I don't
Um,
feel comfortable. I feel unsafe. I am so confused.
yeah.
Yeah, this is that psychological consistency piece that I mentioned. And another great example is like the names that we choose for our business when it's not just our name, but we choose a name for our studio or um the I was just working with someone who's building a coaching business called Unbridled Radiance, I think is what she had. And she's building a coaching business rooted in this ranch that she owns. So it's horses and
Hmm.
sunsets and leather. And I was like, this is such a great creative concept because
Yes.
it matches, right? I'm reading Unbridled Radiance and then I'm seeing this ranch color palette with ranch aesthetic and big open sky and sunset and these bright oranges and like yes, this is the core of psychological consistency. And I think sometimes we just don't think that deeply about things and we'll, choose a name and then we'll choose our colors and we'll do these pieces in isolation without understanding what happens in that first impression when someone lands on our website and we have about a second for them to make a snap judgment about us. There's a lot going on, but color is research says the color is a huge part of what is happening. Sure, design is really, really important as well, which is why I talk about design and color psychology. They're both really important in those snap judgments. But color impacts us faster than just about anything else. And so if I'm reading Unbridled Radiance and I'm seeing black and white, I am immediately mistrustful because in my body, I'm not conscious of it yet, but in my body, I'm like, this doesn't make sense. I thought this was unbridled and radiant, and I'm getting monochrome. Like, that is neither of these things, right? So, making these choices deliberately and making sure they match energetically is really important.
Yes. And sadly, a lot of graphic artists don't understand
Oh,
this.
most don't. Most
I
don't.
fired four
Yeah.
because they would come up with a good logo and good colors, but it didn't reflect me at all. And,
Yeah.
I'd give them all this, and I didn't realize that there are people who actually have taken courses in branding and learning
Strategy in
about these other
particular.
things. Yes.
Yeah.
And
I talk about this a lot because, designers are meant to design and they want us to tell them they want us to tell them what we want so they can make it. That's how design works. And most people find that process so frustrating and disappointing because the way humans work is we need someone to pull out of us what we really mean because we don't have the language for a designer to speak designer. We need to have what we want pulled out of us shown to us so we can say yes or no. And then we want the opportunity to make changes, which is very inefficient for a designer trying to work through loads of logos and very frustrating for the client who's like, I don't speak your language. I thought I've been clear about what I want and don't want. This is not that. I can't tell you yes or no until I see it, but you're only going to give me three options. Like,
right,
you can see how this goes so badly most of the time. And I think there's two really important solves for this. One is if you're in this process looking for someone who is talks about brand strategy or is a brand strategist alongside being a designer, which is typically not the Fiverr or Etsy game, right? Or
right,
it's a different process. The other part of the process is to go into it with a strategy and to be able to use language, which AI is really helping us be able to do now, where you can tell them exactly what you want and why, and then they can just make it for you. So, kind of coming in with a strategy and not just a hope and a wish and hoping that you'll be seen because you either need to go pay someone to see you or you need to go get seen and then bring that data to someone who can turn it into something tangible. Or there's people like me who do both, where, I feel like it's my job to get it out of you, to check it with you, and then to make something that should be, the feedback I've gotten over 2 decades is that this is more me than anything I could have ever dreamed of
right,
because I have language and frameworks and I understand the psychology of what you're saying without you even being able to fully verbalize it.
right.
And that's what you're looking for.
Yes. The woman that I worked with that was successful, she put together this whole book and and right off the bat, she had three logos that were variation, and it was like bing, 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 bing. Yes.
Finally.
The thing, so I really want to get into the discussion about the color of the year,
Oh God,
how
yes.
I found you.
I'm here for it.
But just in a nutshell, one of the things I find fascinating, and I'm sure there must be a color historian category of education, is how colors from decade to decade communicate. Like I'm watching a show. It's called 11/22/60, and it's about a guy that goes back to that date uh, in order to live for 3 years to find out who killed Kennedy, and if so, kill that person. And they go from modern decor to back in time, uh, like the whole motif of the scenes back in 60 are what I remember as a little girl. And, I find that uh, fascinating how colors have trends, the horrible green and orange carpets and things of the
Yep.
70s.
Oh yes.
You
The
know, and
the
all
stuff
of
that
that.
most of us are running from in our childhood, right?
Yes, but now it's back and people are paying big money for this stuff that I thought was hideous, or I liked it for a minute or two, but those tones are way not my color palette, right? We know that now. So, so why do you think, like, is there like a theory of why different eras have different colors? Do you?
Well, I actually just a couple weeks ago did a podcast on my podcast that I've been researching and writing for like a year called The Great Gray Down. So I definitely recommend that's the deep dive into this topic, but I'll try and give you a few high level points. So that's the episode's called The Great Gray Down, like GREY-DOWN. And the podcast is Joy First. The sort of yes and no. The short version is that it's so much deeper than color.
Mhm,
The gist of it is that this is deeply rooted in the sort of puritanical thinking that developed the United States. So if we're just focusing on America, I think part of the reason we love watching shows like Bridgerton,
mhm,
that is just this like colorful feast for the eyes, right? Everything, the food, the dresses, the houses, everything is so beautiful and colorful. That's from a period where people would express their wealth through color because cheaper materials like wool, for example, they couldn't hold very colorful dyes. And
mm,
so people who were poor all wore, natural fibers and muted grays and browns and whatever wool could absorb, essentially. And people who were wealthy could afford silks and satins and materials and dyes that were all very expensive but worked well together. And so, we that was a time where we showed wealth and affluence through color. And that was largely in Europe, and it was largely based in Catholicism and the sort of the ruling class of the day, which was Catholicism and, these monarchies and stuff. Well, we all kind of know about how America was formed and this sort of, religious freedom, which was against Catholicism. And you have this Puritanism coming to America, and one of their main laws, I guess, if you could call it that, um, was about being able to be much more modest and showing their devotion to God through, let's call it minimalism, right? So white, gray, black, right? We just eliminate color. Color became this ungodly thing. And of course, at the same time, you have the slave trade kicking off and you have people going around the world and meeting all sorts of different indigenous peoples. And what are they doing when they go and come back? They are labeling these people, the people themselves, who of course are darker than our white skin, and their communities, their beautiful indigenous rituals and artwork and everything as right? Heathenism and trying to create this dehumanization so that they can create this trade of bringing them over and selling them like they're not human beings. And so we have this kind of movement that happens where being colorful is fundamentally bad,
mhm,
being godly and good and in high standing becomes monochrome, basically.
mhm,
And then from that period, we go through these flip-flops where the Industrial Revolution happens and all of a sudden we can produce colors cheaply. So we do mass produce stuff in color. And then corporate America starts to happen. And then again, wealth is associated with the gray suit and the gray cubicle
mhm,
and right men and professionalism and black and white ties and so it's still fine to have color at home, right? We know the 60s was a really colorful period, but we're starting to get much more monochromatic on Wall Street, where the seats of power are monochrome. They're gray in particular.
mhm.
And so we have sort of flip-flop throughout history, but we have been on a massive gray down. So
Yeah,
there's a great study out. I mentioned it in the podcast about how our objects have become grayer over time, and it's accelerated since the 2000s, I believe, because of technology and how cool Apple is, and how it's all silver and white and
mhm.
monochrome. Is tech brings us a new version of aspiration, which again is monochrome. So that's kind of the gist of it, where we've had a lot of these different cultural forces that have, in a nutshell, in very, very deep ways and also in lighter, more consumer ways, have programmed us to believe that white and monochrome is affluent, it's expensive, it's luxurious, and that color is less than, uncool,
Interesting.
um, easy to get wrong, right? There's also just this fear. Another puritanical thing is this perfectionism where we're just absolutely afraid of getting anything wrong. And so it feels so risky to paint a wall and get it wrong and have to
Yeah,
redo it, right? So
yeah,
there's a lot of layers in there, but that's the
yeah.
gist of it.
Wow, you are blowing my mind.
You got to go listen to that episode. There's a lot
Yeah,
more
I
detail in
just
there.
finished it's a three books of the Huguenot
Mm,
Chronicles or Huguenot about the French Protestants being driven out of England. And there was so much mention of the color of clothes that she was wearing.
yeah.
And sh the main characters were aristocrats. Uh, and they, yeah, I hadn't thought about how many books I read, they mention the color of clothing. So
Hmm.
that's fascinating. Also has me think about and celebrate how the use of color in the African American community got revived in the 70s with the civil rights and Black is Beautiful and all of that. I remember the whole trajectory of that. Um, so I love that history of that. Okay, so before we run out of time or attention, um, so the color of the year is a sort of a little bit of a taupey grade down white, right?
Yeah. Cloud
And
dancer.
big flurry of interesting conversations and shock. And it's a Pantone color, right? Not, on the internet. And so I listened to your podcast about that. And my first, I don't think you mentioned this. This was my reaction when I thought about like why white. And I remember when I was going through a lot of therapy years ago, and angst and upheaval and digging up pain and all those things, all I could wear was white
Hmm.
because I
Yeah.
needed that simplicity. So there's
Hmm.
a part of me that thinks that is a choice because we are, at least in this country, but I know it impacts the world, in a kind of
Joy crisis.
joy crisis
Yep.
that is even on either, who wherever somebody falls, you have to admit it's chaotic. It's change, it's confusing, it's out of the norms. So much um, and not to mention just nature and hurricanes and floods and all of the things that the earth is doing. So part of me thinks that choice, whether it was conscious or subconscious by whoever chooses the Pantone colors, was drawn to white because everything else is so like energized. So,
Hmm.
but I loved your take too. So I'll give you the floor on that.
Yeah, I think your point is a really good one. And I think and I do say this in the podcast, there's a very strong argument for white now for a lot of the reasons that you've said. So if we look to the psychology, the color psychology of white, we're looking at purity, simplicity, clarity. Like there's definitely an argument in the psychology of white for why now. Um, and I think if we're talking about the colors that we're choosing to wear, for example, that makes sense. I get that. And I also think it's important that, like, as someone who talks about color and I have strong opinions about color, and I will definitely say things that I would I'm implying are rights versus wrong. My bottom line is like, you do you, right? Like, whatever brings you joy, you rock on.
Hmm.
My urging is to make sure that it's coming from a place of joy, or like something with white where it's like just what you need right now, medicine, not from a place of default or something darker or more destructive, like, trying to hide because of our self-worth and that kind of stuff. So if you love it, rock on. I am not going to be someone who tells you not to do what you love, regardless of what that, looks like or what color it is. I think the reason there is so much, my take on the reason why there is so much outcry about this color is because it's not just a person and their personal clothing choices.
Right.
It's not that simple. And when Pantone has said for the last 20 years they've been doing this color of the year thing, that they want to emphasize how powerful color is. That's why they started doing it. And they want it to be a cultural conversation. But when they've defended this color of the year, they've said, we've just wanted to start the conversation. Um, you guys are taking it too seriously, basically, because what the outcry was saying is like, okay, we are in an unprecedented time for basically white supremacy, like a whole bunch of
Yes,
racism
that
and
was.
a whole bunch of stuff going on in America that is extremely upsetting in a racial way. And last year's color of the year was brown.
Mm,
This year's color of the year is white. And
yeah.
so I think part of what people are so upset about is the context and just how, a lot of people use the pun Pantone deaf, that it just feels really tone deaf
Hmm.
in the way that people, especially people of color, are feeling right now in the environment in America in particular.
Yes.
And so I think there's an argument for that. I also think that when we look to psychology again of color and what we need during a joy crisis, we have a tendency to numb out. So white can help us numb out, gray can help us numb out. It can help us create this cocoon of feeling nothing. But those of us who work with color would often argue that what we need isn't nothing. What we need is something supportive. What we need is physically soothing, mentally soothing, a bit of happiness, a bit of joy, like things that can add rather than just numb. And
Hmm.
so if we look from that standpoint, now we're in sort of light greens, light blues, light purples, even, light yellows. We're in a place where we can add something supportive to this intense crisis that we're in. And I think the last layer is when you are an institute like Pantone that advocates for color and you choose a non-color
Right.
as your color of the year, your base of designers and creators and people who rely on Pantone for their jobs, like me, feel really let down by the one institute that's supposed to be fighting for color choosing to basically opt out of color.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so I think there's a lot of levels to the conversation. I think it's an interesting one. I think everyone's entitled to their take, to their opinion. Their argument was that this was about the blank canvas, that it's about kind of space for us to create something new. Um, but there were several things they did in the way they brought this color forward that made me wonder if it wasn't actually rage baiting in the same way that the Sydney Sweeney ad was,
Hmm.
where there's absolutely no way they couldn't know this was going to be the conversation. And very strategically, they did a couple of interesting things. They put I think she's the president forward to announce it and defend it. She's a Black woman. They also, in the video that they used to present this color, used predominantly artists of color to talk about their creative process, not about the color white, not
Hmm.
about this color, but about their creative process, which made me wonder if they knew they were going to be advocating for
Right.
white as the color of the year or not. And so those choices were not accidental. And it says to me they knew this was coming and they protected themselves by putting people of color forward to say, like,
Mhm.
look, they think it's a good idea. So, whereas the spokespeople for, the people that apparently choose this color, although we can't see all of them, we can see a few of them on the website. Most of them present as white. Um, None of them, even though they're the ones giving the quotes, they're not the ones in the video defending it, in the videos that go viral. So I think there's some really interesting nuance, and the cynical side of me does ask, like, American Eagle stock went up like 70% after the Sydney Sweeney ad and all the controversy around for those of you who hadn't seen it, there's an ad around good jeans Eagle where there's this whole eugenics conversation about this blonde blue-eyed girl and this play on the word jeans. um it was very, very good for the company, all of that.
Yeah,
So it's that no press is bad press kind of conversation.
right.
Makes me wonder if that's not what they're doing here, because there's a lot of partnerships wrapped up in this color of the year. There's a lot of brand deals, and Pantone has competitors. They're not the only one. They're in a fight to stay relevant, just like every other company. So take with that what you will, and draw your own
Yeah,
conclusions.
yeah, that fascinating, and I love that deeper thought. To me, a lot of times the Pantone colors seem to be because I'm very sensitive to it, and I start seeing trends, and then when they show the colors, the color of the year, I'm usually like, yeah, I've been seeing that. And if we just take the white at face value, I have been noticing for the last year or two in I don't know where I see these things, but um, that designing has become more neutral. That all white kitchens and different kinds of things have been leaning towards
The great gray down.
that. Yes,
Yep.
and that in my naive brain, the Pantone people are just noticing what's on trend and picking that, but I can see that it could be much deeper
I
than
think there's a lot to
that.
it, and there's always what they did and then there's how people respond. And I
Hmm.
think they would have known how people respond, so that
Yes,
and when they say, like, we just want to create conversation, then they knew this conversation was coming,
right.
and it benefits them massively.
Sure.
So that's the bit that's really interesting. And, I think the other thing to mention is that Pantone is not the only color of the year. IKEA's done a color of the year, Etsy's done a color of the year, most paint companies like Benjamin Moore
Right.
and they all do colors of the year, and they've all made different choices as they always do. And there's other color systems, and there were a couple that chose sort of Etsy was one of them, chose sort of a dark teal color
Mm.
as the color of the year. And my sort of take was like, I'll take that one, please. That's really
Yes.
good for collaboration and mental stimulation. And I love teal and it's a crowd pleaser. Like, that's my color of the year.
Yeah. Yeah. My favorite suit when I was a wedding photographer and we wore suits was I called it a navy teal. It was a dark
Nice.
uh, teal that made my eyes pop, and I always felt creative in it and
Hmm.
professional, but in an interesting way. Well,
Yeah,
gosh,
nice.
this is so much fun and fascinating. Thank you so much for saying yes to being on the show. So I have
Thank you for having
two
me.
questions for you, or two and a half. So
Okay.
one is how to how to connect with you. What are your websites or other things that we can go find out more about?
Yeah, so we're right in the middle of kind of adjusting that. So the best place right now is going to be to the website Joy First World, and
Okay,
that is also our Instagram and TikTok. And the Joy First podcast is another good place to find me.
great. And then I know you have that quiz available for us to download. Um, so it is going to be in the show notes, but if somebody is not looking at the show notes, what is the address to that, the URL?
Yes. So, if you want to find out your personality type, like we were talking about, whether you're a seaside, fireside, starshine, you're going to want to go to go.jnicolesmith.com/quiz. And that's JNICHOLESMITH.com/quiz. And there you can take, it's really quick, just a few questions, and you can find out your brand personality type and your color group and see if it matches what you've instinctively built, see if it
Mhm.
resonates. And yeah, there's lots more resources that will follow that if you want to dive deeper. We've just built a really cool program using AI to help you kind of work through these things. So if that's of interest, you'll be able to find out about that. And I wish you luck. This is such an important part of your brand, and I think one that we don't take seriously enough because nobody ever teaches us how important it
Right,
is.
right. All right. So the last question is really just giving you an opportunity to give a parting thought, something that you want us to ponder in our hearts or think about or do. So the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. So, as I mentioned, my personal mission is all about joy. And the Joy First methodology is all about finding, choosing, and sharing joy each day. So, my invitation would be, as we are in the midst of this joy crisis and business is hard and AI is changing everything and the politics are crazy, is really kind of asking yourself, where the joy is for you. And especially when it comes to your business, and if you're feeling like lost or confused or overwhelmed, especially with marketing, social media, like all that madness, is this year for a week, for a month, just lean into your passion and creativity without worrying about the strategy or the algorithm or which platform or any of that, and just follow your gut. Just create some stuff for fun, enjoy it, and follow your joy around for a little while because I think you might find that that is going to be one of your best strategies.
I love it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And um, as I said early on, if people want to check me out, go to lucydumascoaching.com. If you want to look at my portrait branding, my website is just my name, Lucy Dumas, Lucy with an I, for all the things that I've talked about. But Nichole, just I really, really love this conversation and so happy that we were able to find a time. So I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed being here.